So good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Foreign Correspondents Club of Japan. My name is Suvendrini Kakuchi. I'm the president of this club, and I will be your moderator today. On my right is a distinguished speaker, Dr. Patricia Floor, who is the ambassador of the European Union. She will update us on the EU position on the escalating war in Ukraine. As we all know, the EU is a leading player and has provided international assistance to the Ukrainian government, and that includes military assistance. We have, during the past week, we've had ambassadors from Ukraine, Russia, and the United States, and the club is initiating a discussion on this major conflict that is going to have long-term implications on the world order. Dr. Floor will speak at the beginning, and then we will open the floor for question and answer. The session will be for an hour, and we have time till 2:30 p.m. So thank you very much for your time, and the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. And first of all, thank you, to the President, for inviting me today to the Foreign Correspondents Club. And thank you all for joining for this event. Russia's aggression on Ukraine. The European Union condemns in the strongest possible terms Russia's unprecedented military aggression against peaceful, independent Ukraine, its neighbor. By its unprovoked and unjustified military actions, Russia is grossly violating international law and undermining European and global security and stability. We deplore the loss of human life and the suffering. You watch the news. Only a few kilometers from the EU's border, the Russian army is committing barbaric actions during its invasion of Ukraine. It is bombing and launching missile strikes against cities, killing innocent people, civilians. We call on Russia to immediately cease the hostilities, withdraw its military from Ukraine, and fully respect Ukraine's territorial integrity, sovereignty, and independence. Such use of force and coercion has no place in the 21st century. It was President Putin who chose to bring war back to Europe. The EU will make it as difficult as possible for the Kremlin to pursue its aggressive actions. The EU stands firmly by Ukraine and its people. Our unity is our strength. The Kremlin has tried its best to divide us, but it has utterly failed. And it has achieved exactly the opposite. We are more than ever united and determined. In New York, the world has just issued a resounding condemnation of the aggression against Ukraine. 141 member states of the United Nations, an overwhelming majority, voted in favor of the UN General Assembly resolution. Only 5 against. We thank Japan and all countries that supported the resolution. Ukraine is facing its darkest hour, but the Ukrainian people are holding up the torch of freedom, showing immense courage. They are defending their lives, but they are also fighting for all of us, for universal values, and they are willing to die for them. We remain European leaders in close contact with our Ukrainian friends. President Zelensky's leadership, his bravery, and the resilience of the Ukrainian people are outstanding and impressive, an inspiration to us all. In this hour of need, for the first time ever, the European Union will finance the purchase and delivery of weapons and other equipment to a country that is under attack. 500 million euros from the European Peace Facility to support Ukraine's defense. The EU will continue to also provide strong political, financial, and humanitarian assistance to Ukraine and its people, including an emergency macro-financial assistance of 1.2 billion euro. Civilians, unfortunately, are paying the highest price of the illegal Russian military aggression. The war risks killing and maiming many while displacing millions of Ukrainians, leading to a sharp rise in humanitarian needs. The EU announced an additional 90 million euro for emergency aid programs to help civilians primarily affected in Ukraine and in Moldova by this war. The humanitarian aid will provide food, water, health, shelter, and cover basic needs. We will also provide at least 500 million euro from the EU budget to deal with the overall humanitarian consequences, both in Ukraine, but also in terms of the refugees. Refugees, we welcome with open arms those Ukrainians who have to flee from Putin's bombs, and I am proud of the warm welcome that Europeans have given them. Europe stands by those in need of protection. We will provide protection to those seeking shelter, whatever their nationality and their origin, and we will help those looking for a safe way home. We thank all member states, especially the Czechia, Hungary, Poland, Portugal, Romania, and Slovakia for their readiness and willingness to provide immediate protection for refugees from Ukraine. Let me also welcome here the announcement by Prime Minister Kishida that Japan is willing to receive Ukrainian refugees in solidarity with Ukraine and Europe. One word on Ukraine's potential accession to the EU. We have already a process with Ukraine that includes integrating Ukraine into our single market, and over time, the Ukrainian people, they belong with us, they are one of us, and we want them in. I am sure nobody can doubt that a people that stands up so bravely for our European values belongs in our European family. But there is still a long path ahead, and member states will decide about next steps. Let me come to Russia. The European Union and its partners are working to cripple Putin's ability to finance his war machine. We will hold the Kremlin accountable, and the European Union has been stepping up sanctions. The package of massive and targeted sanctions European leaders approved already will have a maximum impact on the Russian economy and the political elite. It is built on 5 pillars: financial, important Russian banks excluding from SWIFT, a ban on transactions of Russia's central bank. The energy and the transport sectors, for instance, an export ban of refining technology and closing down the European Union airspace to Russian planes. Technology, limiting access to dual-use goods, to drones, to semiconductors, and other crucial technology goods. And finally, visa policy and individual sanctions. The European Union has now sanctioned 680 individuals and 53 entities with travel bans, asset freezes, and prohibitions to provide funds. One word, very relevant in this group, on disinformation actors. We have suspended in the EU the licensees for the Kremlin's propaganda machine, Russia Today, Sputnik, and their subsidiaries. They will no longer be able to spread their lies to justify Putin's war and to sow division in our union. And lastly, we will also target the second aggressor in this war, Lukashenko's regime in Belarus, with a new package of sanctions. Let me stress that all of these measures are closely coordinated with our partners and allies, and we are, again, very grateful that countries like Japan, but also Canada, Norway, South Korea, Australia, the UK, and also, of course, the US, have been in lockstep in terms of taking measures of their own. The cost of sanctions. Are there risks? Yes, sanctions do have costs, also for us. But the people of Europe understand very well that we must stand up against this cruel aggression. Protecting our liberty comes at a price we are willing to pay, because freedom is priceless. And our investments today will make us more independent tomorrow. Of course, security of energy supply, for instance, is of concern. We cannot rely on a supplier who explicitly threatens us. And that is why we've also reached out to other global suppliers. I would like to stress that we highly appreciate the support by Japan redirecting contracted LNG cargoes to Europe in case of extra need. In Europe, we are also building new LNG terminals and working on interconnectors. In the long run, though, we have to accelerate the green transition. It's our switch to renewables and hydrogen that will make us truly independent in future. Security and stability in Europe and globally, finally. What we are facing today is a blatant attempt to rewrite the rules of our international system, a threat to the global rules-based order. The Kremlin aims to undermine the entire European security architecture, the Helsinki principles that have made all of Europe safe. It is violating the UN Charter, where it states that countries shall refrain from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. And of course, lately, President Putin has gone so far as to threaten the use of nuclear arms. So there's a joint task for the international community here. Do not let President Putin tear down the security architecture that has given Europe and the world peace and stability over many decades. Do not allow President Putin to replace the rule of law by the rule of force and ruthlessness. To cite the High Representative and Vice President of the EU, Josep Borrell, the international community must opt for a full-scale isolation of Russia to hold Putin accountable for this aggression. We are and will remain closely aligned with partners and allies. Again, the US, Canada, UK, Japan, others. Yesterday at the General Assembly, the world came together in a historic moment to protect the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine. The world demands that Russia ceases the use of force and withdraws all military forces from the entire territory of Ukraine, immediately, completely, and unconditionally. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Flor. The floor is open for questions. please come up to the microphone. Yes, Peter, or yeah, okay, Pio, go ahead first. Okay, Peter, go ahead.
It's Peter Langen at the South China Morning Post in Hong Kong. You mentioned, Ambassador, Mr. Borrell calling for the full-scale isolation of Russia, but actually that's not happening. We know the world's third largest economy, second largest economy, I beg your pardon, is China. And while we have all these sanctions being imposed by Europe, the US, and its allies, China's going the opposite direction. It's lifting restrictions on Russian agricultural imports and signing new energy deals with Russia. So this weekend, the National People's Congress starts, and on Monday, the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi will give his press conference. Can I ask you, what does the EU want to hear from China? And what action does it want China to take regarding the Russian invasion of Ukraine? Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to collect, or shall I immediately answer? No. Yes, okay, thank you. Well, let me repeat that the call from the European Union goes out to all countries, and that includes China, to consider that Russian actions undermine the Charter of the United Nations, the principles and the rules that undergird our global community. And therefore, this call, of course, also goes out to China, and therefore our call to China, as to everyone else, is to join the efforts of the international community in standing up against the violation of international law and standing up for the protection of international law that says that the territorial integrity, the sovereignty, and the independence of any country should be respected, which is actually something that also China has repeated multiple times recently. Let me remind that this aggression from Russia was unprovoked, unjustified, against a country, Ukraine, that was no threat, certainly, to Russia.
Okay, Peter. All right. You go ahead.
Pio D'Emilio from Italy, Sky TG24 TV. Well, there are so many issues, actually, but let's start with a couple of them. The first one is, as a European, not only journalist, but citizen, the idea that we are furnishing weapons to any other country belligerently right now, it's something really new, especially for countries like yours, Madam Ambassador, Germany. For us, Italians, we have in the Constitution a ban for that. How do you feel it could work out this? Because you know that Putin has declared that whoever will give weapons to Ukraine will be considered a belligerent country. So we citizens are theoretically at risk for that. Secondly, technically, I understand that at the moment the project is to send the weapons to, get the weapons from different places and send them to Poland. Because, of course, we cannot give it directly to Ukraine. Don't you think that there is a little bit of hypocrisy in this? Hypocrisy. Well, we take the weapons to Poland and then we turn away and we wait until the Ukrainians take them overnight. I mean, this is one issue that I would like you to address. And then the second one is about refugees. Mm-hmm. You say that Europe stands by those seeking help. Well, We all know that the refugee issue in Europe is not only now, it's been years. And even now, at the border from Belarus and Poland, there are tens of thousands of people that are still discriminated upon and are not allowed to enter Europe. How do you comment on this clear discrimination about refugees?
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Yes, first of all, the delivery of weapons and the financing from the European Peace Facility is a new element. But then let us also face the reality that we are also in a situation which is unprecedented. We haven't seen this kind of situation practically since the Second World War. So therefore, it requires new measures, new decisions. And it requires that we support the Ukrainian people defending their country. Now, how does it work technically? Technically, it works, the EU will finance, but the material, the weapons, the drones, whatever it is, will come from member states. And obviously, this will need to be coordinated, which is the reason why both there is a coordination cell in the EU, and then Poland has actually offered to act as the coordinator for the delivery of these weapons to Ukraine. But there's no, what you suggested, there's somehow, it's hidden. This is not the case. It's clear. These weaponry is to support Ukraine, and of course Poland is a neighboring country, so you need to bring that into Ukraine, so you need to do that from a neighboring country, so there's nothing strange about that. And it's clear that the time to provide military support to Ukraine is now. Now they are in the most dire need of having supply and being able to continue fighting. So therefore, it is clear that many member states actually are willing to then provide the weapons which would then go to assist the Ukrainians. And so therefore, this decision, which is unprecedented, is an important demonstration of EU solidarity with Ukraine and the unity within the European Union in supporting Ukrainian resistance against the aggressor. Your second question. First of all, let me say that the EU and its member states are strongly committed to ensure equal treatment for all people arriving at their borders, fleeing the war from Ukraine. Of course, you have a very, very high number of refugees right now, more than 650,000 already. So yes, there is an organizational challenge at the border, but it is clear that the EU will stand up to our international obligations deriving from the 1951 Geneva Convention on the Protection of Refugees. All member states have signed this convention. And this is a clear case of a refugee flow, people fleeing from a war situation. So therefore, they clearly all come under the 1951 convention. And so they should all be granted access to the EU regardless of nationality, ethnicity, skin color, gender, or any other criterion.
Okay, thank you. We've got questions sent by email, and before that, could I ask you a question about the status of the peace talks? I mean, have they completely broken down? What is the situation on that front?
I cannot answer because, of course, these are direct talks between, the ones that took place were direct talks between Ukraine and Russia. So therefore, from the EU side, I cannot comment.
All right. Okay, so then the first question sent by Anthony Rowley. Would you agree that a stronger European Union, politically and militarily, and a more diluted NATO influence could have prevented this conflict, and even now could achieve a modus vivendi?
Thank you for the question. Of course, First of all, a stronger European Union is clearly necessary in our current global environment. And that is actually not new, and that is also the reason why EU member states and the EU over the last years have already stepped up our efforts to make the European Union stronger in terms of strategic autonomy, in terms of creating the European Defence Fund, the European Defence Agency, in terms of stepping up coordination of defence efforts between all member states. Also in terms of expanding, of course, our CSDP, our civilian and security missions abroad, such as fighting piracy at the Horn of Africa and meeting other challenges. So what you can see, if you track the last decade, you can see that the European Union and the member states have increasingly been committed to strengthen the European Union and its capability and capacity to respond to crises, whatever they may be. And yes, that is the right answer in terms of the current challenges from my point of view.
Okay, good. We have Eric Johnston from the Japan Times. You've said you welcome Japan's willingness to accept Ukraine refugees. What specifically are you encouraging Japan to do to help accept more Ukraine refugees? Are you encouraging the Japanese government to grant any Ukrainian now in Japan refugee status if they apply, or grant refugee status for not only themselves, but also for their immediate family members?
Thank you for the question. First of all, let me say that obviously, those Ukrainians who currently live abroad, including in Japan, cannot return to their home country at this particular moment. So therefore, yes, I think all countries, including Japan, should allow them to remain safe where they currently are, including their families. The other fact is that in any refugee crisis, and this is no different here, the UNHCR, the UN agency dealing with refugees, and the High Commissioner for Refugees is always also calling on global solidarity to assist those countries who are the immediate neighbors and those immediately affected by refugee flows, because they, of course, carry the first load, the biggest load. And I would say that in Europe, of course, with the European Union, we can also and do shoulder a large part of this burden. But at the same time, of course, there will be gratefulness for any solidarity action by any other country willing to accept some of these refugees. Of course, if they wish to go to Japan or any other country. And this is usually a process which is facilitated by the UN Refugee Agency.
We have Fred Wako, freelance. People say that Putin only understands power. Do you think Europe was too soft in preventing this atrocity by not taking any military action, even if only defense action? And do you think military action from the West will be needed?
Well, on the second question, I'm no prophet. On the first question, let me say that Europe, and I still do think rightly so, did invest in peace, in reconciliation, in peaceful conflict resolution, in cooperation. That is the foundation of the European Union. That's the reason for our coming into being. And I still think that this was the right response, obviously, after the Second World War. What we face now is one state with President Putin at the head, one person who did decide to bring war back to Europe. Should we then revisit all of our fundamental principles and values? I don't think so. I think that it would still be the right thing to look for peace and peaceful conflict resolution and peaceful settlement of conflicts whenever they arise. And I think that we should stand by that principle too, despite the fact that in this current acute situation, with the aggression against Ukraine, we are also forced to take all the other steps which are needed.
And Fred has a related question. Is it the EU stance that sanctions and other actions will stay in place until Putin is no longer ruling Russia? What further sanctions can the EU put in place?
Let me first of all say that these sanctions were adopted by the European Union, by member states and also by other states because of the invasion into Ukraine. So clearly the key demand is the one which I've already made in my opening statement. It is withdraw all your forces from Ukraine, return to your own territory and restore peace in Ukraine, all of Ukraine. And that immediately, so that is the key target of the sanctions.
Yes.
Hi, Rocky Swift with Reuters. I just wondered if you could expand a bit on what you said earlier about Japan's LNG contributions to Europe. What has been sent so far? What might be needed in the future? Any other details you can give on that? Thank you.
Thank you. Let me start from the European end, because it is on the European end that actually the EU has invested in increasing our supplies, increasing our reserves in order to, of course, try to safeguard our energy needs in this developing crisis. So therefore, the first call, of course, is for us to ourselves try to find a good way to actually cover our energy needs with the different, opportunities and options that we have. However, in case of need, and I would like to again stress that, of course, we might see energy problems in Europe, and therefore we are actually grateful for all those who would be willing to divert LNG to Europe in this kind of a situation. And Japan has signaled that willingness, and it's very welcome. But it's also welcome that some of the producers, energy producers, have actually increased their production in order to meet the energy needs, not only of the EU, but globally in this particular situation.
Yes, over there.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. I'm Hinata Miura from Nikkei, Japanese newspaper. And I'd like to ask you about Japan's sanctions, and how do you think about Japan's sanctions so far, and how do you think Japan need more, or what to do in the future?
Yes, thank you. First of all, I underlined already in my starting remarks that we have moved in coordination with partners, international partners. The G7 format also played a key role, and Japan has really been moving in parallel and in total coordination with EU, US, and others on this. And that is a very, very good sign, because from our point of view, every day counts. It counts in terms of what's happening in Ukraine. So therefore, we have highly appreciated this very strong and close cooperation with Japan on sanctions. There are some areas where the EU has gone beyond the current decision-making here in Japan. Let me mention the closure of our airspace. So in these areas, I would ask everyone, again, also to consider their own policies and possible steps in these fields. Because the more we are united in our sanctions approach to the Russian Federation, the higher actually the cost for Russia and the higher the chances of influencing decision-making in Moscow.
Hello. I'm Kazuo Nagata of Yomiuri Shimbun newspaper. I was a Brussels correspondent some 30 years ago. Well, I covered the European Union's first round of expansion into the East. And so I wanted to ask you about this Ukraine's formally applied for membership. But how soon can that do you think can that happen? Well, the country is actually under the war, under attack. And of course, I understand Aki Communautaire will still apply. They have to go over tens of thousands of pages, well, starting with all the hygiene standard and so on. So, well, so how realistic can that be? Well, is there a chance that Ukraine will be given kind of an honorary membership, like you'll be like you will give it to her later?
Yes, thank you. Well, indeed, you've already said it yourself. All accession processes to the European Union have been time-consuming and very lengthy, 10 years and more, because to join the European Union as a member state means that you have to adjust all of your legal system. You have to apply all of the rules of the single European market. So it's a daunting task for any country. So therefore, it is a long path. It is a long path. Let me highlight that with Ukraine, we are already working with them to bring them into the single market. So we are already preparing the ground. But it will be a long process, and as I've said before, the EU member states are the ones who make the decisions about opening this path and then also the timing. And so therefore, this is also something that we will need to wait to see.
Yes, Peter.
Can I follow up on my earlier question? Because I don't think you answered the second part of what action does the EU want to see from China? So just to illustrate, the sanctions, if it's a war of sanctions, the great big hole in that argument, as I said, is China is conducting business as usual with Russia. So does there come a point, or what is the point where the EU starts reassessing its own trade relationships with China, considering it's such a massive partner, to try and bring pressure on Beijing to comply with these international sanctions? But really the stress is on what action does the EU want from Beijing? Thank you.
Thank you. Let me say, I don't know when there will be a point where we will consider something which is currently, of course, not in the cards. But let me say that, of course, as I said before, the call from the EU is really to everyone, including China, to react to the aggression against Ukraine. So that means that we would wish to see that China is, as many others, speaking up about the aggression against Ukraine and considering what steps to take. But this is a call that we are making to all countries globally at this particular time.
Pierre.
Hi, again, Pier D'Emilia from Sky TG24. First is, what do you think about the proposal that came out, but apparently is not being followed up, a no-fly zone on Ukraine? What is the position of EU on that? And secondly is a more philosophical one. I mean, Europe has always lacked a common defense, a common army. Do you think that this unfortunate occasion will bring European countries seriously discussing a joint defense and army, which, to be very frank has not been very much favored and pleased by US.
Yes, first of all, no flight zone in Ukraine. I think that the key question in this context would be who enforces it. So I think that it's not about, it does really not get us anywhere if we talk about what would be desirable, or it's about then setting up the necessary steps. Then the common army, or let me say, I think that within the European Union, as you are aware, we have actually achieved a strong competencies for the Union. So member states have transferred competence on the market, the trade, and other areas to the European Union. But it is equally clear that the foreign and security policy is a member state prerogative and field. And therefore, I think that concretely speaking, we are on the right path in terms of strengthening the cooperation among member states and bringing that under an umbrella of the European Union, encouraging cooperation on, for instance, defense industry projects, on the sharing of capabilities. I think this is the right path forward, to build on what we have in the EU, what member states have, and to try to support the strengthening of cooperation among these different forces. And let me say that I would also claim that the experience with EU missions, military and civil military missions, such as Atalanta at the Horn of Africa, or of course also missions in Mali. The EU is an actor in the security field, and that means that member states bring all of these capabilities to these missions, but nonetheless, we have worked very well and we have made a difference in terms of having these EU missions. So I think that the way forward is to strengthen our cooperation among member states under the EU roof and umbrella.
Yes, I just want to then, Anthony Rowley has sent another question about the desirability of a diluted NATO presence in the EU. What is your comment on that?
I would want to stress that at this particular point in time, there is an unprecedented, close cooperation between the EU and NATO in terms of coordinating our crisis response, but also in terms of looking at the strengths that the EU has, that NATO has, and how we can best, build on that. And I think that obviously the EU is a necessary and strong actor in Europe today, as is NATO in the defense field.
Yes. Oh, yes, there's one on the refugee issue. Ilgin Yoruluzmaz, BBC World Turkish. She's asking, are you expecting non-EU members like Turkey to share some of the refugee burden, like in the case of Syrian refugees?
First of all, it is clear that Turkey has played a key role on the Syrian refugee issue, and there has been, again, a very good cooperation between the EU and Turkey on this particular issue. So potentially, I would say yes in terms of Ukraine, but I can't really go beyond that, speaking from Tokyo, because I'm not, of course, directly involved in that.
Yes, thank you. Any follow-ups or anything? Yes. Yeah.
My name is Kurt Sieber. Thank you very much for an excellent presentation. I'm an associate member here. I have two questions. The first one is, how tight is the situation with the SWIFT? There are all kind of rumors going around. who is part of it and who is not part of it. Also, it was said that Russia has kind of found or produced a similar system on their own, and so on and so on. That's my first question. The second question is, and this is a little bit delicate, I mean, from outside we have seen over the years, last few years, that Poland and Hungary has not always been on the same line as the EU as a whole. I would guess that now Poland is very strongly interested because they're the next one on the line. And how about the situation in Hungary? Thank you so much.
Thank you. First of all, regarding SWIFT, so the EU decision means that important Russian banks are excluded now from the SWIFT system. And at the same time, we have also banned transactions of Russia's central bank and also frozen their assets, with, of course, the main goal to prevent that they continue to finance the war in Ukraine. That means that we actually have cut Russia's access to the most important capital markets. This is very clear. And we are targeting 70% of the Russian banking market and also key state-owned companies, including in the field of defense. So from our point of view, these sanctions will be effective. They will increase Russia's borrowing costs, they will raise inflation, and they will gradually erode Russia's industrial base, including in the defense industry sphere. Regarding Poland and Hungary, yes, of course, it's no secret that there have been quite a lot of discussions with those two member states about particular areas of concern with conflicting views. So that's not new. But let me again underline that in this particular crisis, member states of the European Union, including Poland and Hungary, have rallied around very difficult decisions very fast. And they've been united, and this is why within the course of a few days we've been able to adopt 3 consecutive packages of sanctions, and we have been able to speak with one voice. And so therefore, if there's one thing that is really being demonstrated in this crisis, is that the crisis has brought all of us together even stronger than before. We are now more united, and that includes Poland and Hungary, who indeed are also close to where this crisis is currently unfolding. So it's a very, it's maybe a message or a lesson that also should be understood in Moscow. The pressure on us makes us stronger and more united.
Okay, Pia.
What has changed in European balance from 1999 when NATO bombed Serbia? At that time, NATO did that operation, the Forced Allied operation, but as I well remember, it was actually many years ago, EU did not participate directly, was very, very sensitive about that. The single state part of NATO did contribute, including Italy and Germany, but the EU stood apart, and that was also not in an EU country like Ukraine. What has changed? Why do you think that the EU has now taken this direct approach to war?
It is very clear that the current situation which we face is one where a peaceful, democratic country next to us associated with the EU, and no threat to anyone has been invaded by the Russian Federation. This is the situation which we have now, and it is quite unprecedented. And this is the situation within which the European Union rises to the challenge in terms of our action, both in terms of supporting Ukraine, including with arms and weapons, as well as taking and adopting sanctions and a sanctions regime which is equally unprecedented in its scope and impact. So our reaction reflects the gravity of the current situation with Russia disregarding international law, invading its neighbor, its brother country, for no reason, with innocent people now losing their lives in Ukraine.
Okay, thank you. We've got, I think, time for another question. So we have Ilgin from BBC World Turkish again. Some people liken President Putin to Hitler. What can Russia and President Putin learn from your own country, Germany's troubled past, before and during World War II, from that perspective?
Well, I am a historian, and I find that such comparisons are always very difficult because each situation is different, so I don't want to make any comparisons. But obviously, it is clear what happened during the Second World War was that it ended in total defeat.
Yes. Indeed. I just want to maybe ask the final question. We've got about 5 minutes more. It's just that even as we speak, the war seems to be raging. And how effective do you think the sanctions are?
I do think that the sanctions are effective, but of course it is also true that the sanctions bite over time. So we will see an increasing impact of these sanctions as we go forward in time. But I think that you can already observe the very direct impact that, for instance, the closure of the airspace and the freezing of assets has had, especially also the financial, sanctions. You can see it if you look at the figures, the economic figures, the ruble, what's happening in Russia. So there are immediate consequences, and they are being felt in Russia. And so therefore, yes, these sanctions will be effective, and also in the longer run, they will be effective.
Okay, so one last question then, Peter. Yeah.
There was a conversation yesterday with a couple of analysts in Europe about giving Putin an off-ramp. That is, he's done what he's done. If he gets bogged down and it doesn't play out as he had expected, rather than humiliation, the means to give him an off-ramp to get out of this and somehow bring about some normalcy again. Are you aware of any discussions in the EU about that idea or process? Thank you.
No, I am not aware. Sitting here in Tokyo, I don't know if anybody is discussing that back home. But let me make a personal comment, which is that before any such discussion makes sense, we need to see a strong signal from Putin that he is changing his approach. Stop your assault. Stop your troops. Withdraw. Anything that would signal that there is somebody on the other side interested in having a conversation.
So I want to thank Dr. Flor for your time and sharing, giving us an update. We don't have an honorary membership ready right now, but you're most welcome, and we will send it to you. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking Dr. Flor.
Thank you for having me as a journalist in my early professional life, yes. I always enjoy coming back to you. Thank you.
Yes, we look forward
Thank
to
you
it.
so
Thank
much.
you.